My name is Marcia Robinson, and we are recording an oral history with Mr. Jim Kraft as part of the Sweet MUMories Oral History Project. This project marks the 50th anniversary of the Miami University Middletown, Ohio campus. This interview is taking place on May 3rd, 2017 at the Gardner Harvey Library. Mr. Kraft, do I have your consent to proceed with this interview?
Yes, you do.
So how long have you lived in Middletown?
Since the day I was born, except for 2 years when I was transferred to the Armco's executive offices in New Jersey.
And did you graduate from Middletown High School?
I certainly did, Middletown High School, yes.
What did you do after graduation?
Well, nothing for several years. Then I got married, and as soon as I got married, then I started night school at the University of Dayton. This would have been about 1956. And I got my undergraduate degree there. I thought that's associate degree, and then went on and got a bachelor's degree. And from there, then I went down to Xavier University in Cincinnati and got my master's in business administration from there. And had this campus been here at that time when I started, I probably would have gone there and ended up getting that degree from Miami of Ohio instead, but it wasn't here then. But the fact that it was here later on was really helpful, I think, to the community, the people, at least parents, the cost would have been a lot less. Travel time would have been a lot less. It'd been more convenient, and I think this satisfied, a need that Middletown had, because we had a lot to respect for Miami of Ohio. I guess they still do, but I've been retired from. I retired from our Armco before AK in 1990 when I was 55 years old. And then after that, I started the next day working for Fifth Third Bank. I was there 5 years, and I retired from there as a vice president, and that was in 1995. But what I did at Fifth Third was selling what I used to buy, which was banking services and so on. And from the bank I was selling, because Fifth Third had a program then they were trying to call on corporate offices of businesses that was in the Fifth Third banking area. And I knew all these, or they knew my name because I had been on the Cincinnati Cash Management Board. We started that. And I was a part of the National Corporate Cash Management Board. I was on that. It was named Treasury Management Association during my tenure, so a lot of the folks recognized my name, and I could get into the corporate offices with the Fifth Third calling officer. So that's basically what I did. It really wasn't much of a job. It was a lot of fun.
I hear there was a lot of fun in this town when people went to work, when they left work, that the company was really part of the community to make sure that there was a good sense of community in Middletown. Can you tell us what that was like to watch as a child and then to see that as an employee?
Yeah, as a child, thinking back, we came out here to Bunny Hollow to the Armco Park then, and that True Steel book has a lot of this stuff in it, which you can read, and in fact, I even had the pages marked. Anyway, what I enjoyed in this town, of course, I played a little bit of softball and stuff like that, and I saw Bill Donham's picture in that ribbon cutting ceremony in that book, and played against him, not hole, but softball was fast pitch in those days. But the company was never stood in the way of letting their employees work in the community, beyond committees, and that is expanded to church and school too, activities. Because I was I was involved, you know, with some of that too. And let me tell you another side of that. That was a two-way street because Armco, even though they saw that as, beside helping the community, it was helping those employees to earn managerial experience that you know, that helped them in their career later on, you know, at Armco. And that's what benefit Armco got out of it, because it was a two-way street, as I'm trying to say. And I don't think a lot of people realize that. But
so what kind of projects would Armco employees be involved in?
Almost anything that was needed. I can tell you the stuff I was involved in. Mine was mostly in the Catholic community. As a matter of fact, I've worked about 50-some years on the Family Festival. I used to run all their finances, and you know, like I said, there was a lot of things. And Will Donham, there's pictures in the book. He was involved there.
Which church was the Family Festival with?
The Family Festival was Fenwick High School. You know, that was the consolidation of three. Fenwick High School was a consolidation of three parishes. There was St. John's, Holy Trinity, and St. Mary. And incidentally, St. Mary is now the community center over there, senior citizen center. And there was an old gravel road off of Central Avenue that went up right past that property onto what is now the Arboretum, but it used to be a fresh air camp. And I did go there as a kid, as a 6-year-old. I spent a summer there in that fresh air camp. And it was for, I guess, you're underweight or whatever, and you know, it helped. It was a very good experience.
Okay. Do you remember when people started talking about building a university in Middletown? What was it like at work? What did people say?
Well, I think people encourage it because, you know, initially you didn't have all the courses here because we had to go to Oxford to get your finance and all that kind of stuff. A lot of liberal arts stuff was here, I guess, initially, but you couldn't graduate from here either. You had to graduate from Miami, if I'm remembering that right. But that's basically what you know, what it was all about. And I want to tell you something. As part of my career at Armco, we had, you know, to recruit individuals to come to work for us. We had our human resources department line up, and this is for finance now. We'll line up times and so on, and candidates. They would go to the university and let the university supply the candidates for us. And so we had a committee that worked on all of this to get people who are candidates who we wanted to offer jobs to. And Miami of Ohio was one of them. We had real good success in the people we had hired, you know, from there. And but I mean, for example, the committee, we had people that went to the university that talked half-hour interview to the students, and there was somebody who was assigned, if the student happened to come from, well, not just from Middletown, but from wherever we went, they would come in the night before, they would spend time with that candidate, and then they would you know, have dinner with them, breakfast the next morning, had 3 interviews with them, and then at the end of the week, everybody who was involved with those candidates would decide which ones we wanted to hire. And we had a lot that we really used from Miami of Ohio. It was a very interesting process. When you asked a student from 3 different individuals, 3 different interviews, you ask them a question, these questions were designed to have the same answer, even though the questions sounded different. It was thought of. And if that student came up with a different answer in one of the 3 interviews, we knew there was something going on there that they really didn't understand and sort of eliminated themselves from but that's the extent that we got into this. So
okay.
but then we're really glad to see Mom getting started here, because, that meant, like for the parents, and, I had some kids that went to Mom, a couple of grandkids that graduated from Miami, Ohio. In fact, one of them just graduated this past year. So one of my grandkids.
So how many children again graduated from here?
I have 2 grandchildren that have graduated from Miami, Ohio. We had 7 children, and my wife raised them because I went to night school.
Right.
And I think 3 in diapers at one time. We don't want to put that in here.
Well, we can back up. We do have stories from women talking about having children and going back to school, but we don't have many stories about men going to school at night. And
really?
I would like to know more. What did it mean that you spent your time in class instead of being with your friends after work? What were the pressures of being a father and going to school? Would you mind telling us about that, so maybe that's inspiring some of our current fathers who are in school?
Well, when I was going to night school, I had my kids. We had 4 boys, 3 girls. My wife literally raised them. I wasn't there that much. You can imagine going to night school and then and spending that time riding to Dayton. It would have been a lot more convenient to go here in Middletown, and that's why I thought this campus was really going to be a great addition. And then, of course, Armco donated it. We had really no use for this, but there was a story one time that Armco bought this land for a future mill site, but that was not true. They ended up going at the end of Crawford Street, out there when they really built the plant. But this was not really bought for that purpose. But I did walk these things, these trails and so on when I was young, and of course, being involved with Wildwood Golf Course for all those years. We belonged there for about 50-some years. Still belong.
Can you tell us about the discussion at Wildwood to give some land to the university?
I know Wildwood was part of this land, the 500-some acres that was had purchased, and then got Armco's board to buy it. But that's all in that book that So.
Okay. When I look at the committee work, it seemed that Evelyn Day got everything started, but then the men took over and Evelyn's name dropped out of the newspaper. Was that because she's female?
I knew Evelyn very well when she worked there at Armco, and she was a very, very competent, very smart individual. And I will say, if she had been a male, probably would have went farther than just being a secretary.
Thank you. I heard she was involved in many organizations in town, and so thank you for sharing that memory of Evelyn Day.
So I will say one more thing about her. She was very involved with the Armco Girls, too.
I understand that Armco Girls was very important to many of the women who worked at Armco. Can you tell us about what Armco Girls meant to the people at the factory?
Well, you're using the word factory, but you got to remember Armco's corporate headquarters was here in Middletown too, and there was probably maybe 40% of the people in the work for Armco in the city of Middletown probably worked on Curtis Street as opposed to Middletown Works. So the Armco Girls, was really a part of all of that, and so there was more so as time went on, because I guess in the earlier days the women stayed at home, and then gradually as time evolved, and actually economy had a lot to do with this. You had to have 2 incomes to have a decent living, so they became members of the workforce, and the Armco Girls was a good outlet for those individuals. And also I think of some of the men that had wives would associate with some of the activities the Armco Girls had. So it was involved in more in the whole community, rather than just just the Armco side of it.
And where were the men when the ladies were at Holiday House?
Well, if they were athletic, they were playing softball, which I was involved with. They were playing basketball. They were playing golf, which most of us belonged to Wildwood. Some of us belonged to Browns Run out west of town there. And also Armco Park had a par 3 golf course. I go back, when Armco Park was organized back in 1950 something, I kept the books for that park as part of my job for the first 13 years. And ironically, when it was sold to Warren County, there was actually about 4 entities that bought that. Alderbine and Warren County were 2 of them, and there were 2 other entities. And my brother managed Armco Park, my younger brother managed Armco Park for the last 13 years of the history of the park. So I was involved at the beginning of it, and he was involved at the end of it, so, which I thought was sort of interesting. But
now, are we talking about the park at Bunny Hollow, or are we talking about the other location?
On 741.
Okay.
Yeah, that Armco Park, that's where the par 3 was out there.
Can you tell us about managing the properties like Armco Park and Bunny Hollow? Were there any people that come to mind?
Yes, the guy that was primarily responsible for that was an individual named Walter Fall. But Walter Fall reported to the treasurer of Armco, which was really the same department I was in. So we would have our department outings and some, and I got to know Walter pretty well in that. Same as the guy that was the individual that was manager of our park out on Route 741. So he was also reported to the Armco's treasurer.
So the land came to the treasurer, the management of all of the land came through the office of the treasurer for organization purposes.
All of that was not steel making facilities that did not have steel making facilities on them.
We have stories of people working at the Armco headquarters. We have stories of Evelyn Day, Mr. Verity, Mr. Hook. Do you have stories of people working there that you'd like to share with us?
Maybe share my own.
Sure.
My own story there, because I started Middletown Works in 1952, graduated high school in 52. And I guess nepotism got my job because my uncle was one of Armco's first traveling salesmen. And my dad worked there forever, and I had a brother work there, 2 brothers that actually worked there, and some other members of my family. So we might say we are sort of an Armco family, but I went over to, as soon as I got my associate degree from University of Dayton, they transferred me over to the corporate accounting office at Curtis Street. And I was in there for about 6 months and then transferred down to corporate treasury. Actually, it was the cashier's office, because I managed Armco's cash flow directly, and a few years at the end, a fellow who worked for me managed it for almost 28 years. And we're talking about, well, if you got a $5 billion sales, if you divide that by 250 work days, that comes up to almost 20 million a day, that we were working with. And I had $100 million floating in the Federal Reserve System at that time. So if you, there was a couple of years back here in the 80s where, the interest rates got up to 18, 19%. If you multiply that times 100 million, you're talking about 18, 19 million dollars of income that went right to the bottom line. But that went back to the divisions. It wasn't corporates. Okay. But Armco corporate, Treasury, which Walter Fall and the rest of us reported to, we had a thing called the T-Men, which was an organization stand for Treasury. We had a pin, and Walter was part of that, and that's where I really got to know him, because, like I said, he reported to the treasurer like we did, and we'd have our golf outings and our other outings and so on, so that was outside of the fact. Now, I'm bringing this up mainly because this is the kind of thing you asked, what did the men do when the women were involved with Armco Girls? This was something that, we had in our department that we were involved in. Of course, the women weren't involved with that. So I think a man would look in. I know I did. I looked into if there was something for the ladies to do. I mean, it was great. And Armco was well-minded, family-oriented, and I think helped in that respect, no matter what sex you were. So.
I get that feeling. But I'm also amazed at your career. So you started off working in the works. 1 degree took you into the corporate office. Did that happen for many people because of the university being opened?
No, this was before the university was open, but I think some people, probably followed that path. But the way I looked at it, I missed out at home, in a lot of things. But the way I looked at it, if I went to school, where would I end up? I would know where I ended up because I ended up there. But if I wanted to go and never went, I would never know. So that was the attitude I had. I thought I'd pursue that, and I think my family probably suffered a little bit for that because my wife made a lot of decisions. I know I created a very independent woman. Still is, as a matter of fact. Now I'm number 2.
That happens a lot in Middletown, from what I've seen. Mm-hmm. This was a company town, but there were also other companies, the paper mill companies, the tobacco companies. Did you see many employees or their children from those companies come to the Middletown campus once it opened?
Oh yes, yes. As it was, I saw this very good because, in fact, I wish the campus was here when I started, because the travel time, the cost, would have been a lot more convenient. I could have spent more time with my family because the travel time was less, and I think the campus had a very, very, very important role in family life, not just Armco people, but the whole town, really.
I understand that this campus serves the community by having a place where you could have cultural events or hear a speaker. Did your family participate in any of these events? Over
the years, yes, they did participate. And I will say, this is the 3rd of May, 2017. There was a dance recital here 2 days ago, and I was here. I had a great-granddaughter participating in that. So yes, and I had a couple grandchildren that graduated from Miami of Ohio, and so yes, we've been involved with it. And like I said, I just wish it came earlier. I would be younger now, or else the campus would be older, one or the other. So we would have been more involved with it. But.
So did Mom help Middletown families? Because the kids could stay here to go to school. Did it help families stay together?
Oh, I think so. It helped families. Like I said, it helped the whole community. I don't know if it was in this interview or not, but I mentioned it was a two-way street. Armco got some developing its own people. Did I mention that in this inventory?
Just a little, but I want to know more about this two-way street.
Well, I saw it that way, and I think others did, but Armco, by letting its folks and giving them time off to participate in city activities, city of Middletown activities, maybe church activities, and maybe school activities, school board, those kinds of things. That was really manager's experience that Armco employees were getting, which would help them in their job back at Armco. And Armco looked at it that way as a sharing thing. So it worked out real well over the years.
Do you remember seeing any of the buildings being built here?
Off and on, yes, because, you said I belonged to Wildwood for 50-some years. And then the only time I did not live in Middletown was the several years that I spent at Armco's executive offices in New Jersey, in Morristown and Parsippany, New Jersey. I was out there several years. So all the rest of my career was here in Middletown.
Okay.
And do you want me to get into AK Steel, how that came to be?
Yes, let's go to the 1980s. Let's talk about the economy of the 1980s and what happened here.
Well, in the 1980s, the United States lost most of its steel industry. Armco was in bed with a company called Republic Steel. They were headquartered up in the Cleveland area. We were in bed at Reserve Mining in the Mesabi Range. We were one of the first companies up there. Armco and Republic started that. It was mined their taconite up there. But Bethlehem Steel, Inland Steel, and Republic Steel, the ones I just mentioned, all went bankrupt. National Steel, Armco and U.S. Steel did not go. They had two things in common. Armco had a subsidiary called National Supply, which was one of the largest manufacturers of oil well and oil field drilling equipment in the world. U.S. Steel had a company called National Oil Well. Those two were merged. That helped because U.S. Steel was more diversified than we were. So it was a little easier for them to survive than it was for us. But the thing that really, really helped us was a company called Kawasaki Steel in Japan. Kawasaki bought half of Middletown Works and half of Ashland Works. And of course, we realized money from that. We operated that as a partnership for a while. Then that was taken public. And the name Kawasaki and Armco, A was first, K was second, became AK Steel. And that stock was sold on the market. Kawasaki got their share of that stock, I guess, and went back to Japan. We got our share of that stock and dumped it in their pension funds. Our pension funds were funded at that time, according to actuarial tables. So anyway, that got those in good shape. Or AK went their way, Armco went their way, and we operated. Now, if you think back, Armco could not really have had two, or Middletown or anywhere. There could not have been two major steel companies sitting side by side on Curtis Street. So Armco had to vacate Middletown to set up, they could make decisions better there because, they were cutting back and wives may be playing cards together, and one wife may have been a wife of a guy who made a decision to close something down. The other wife, husband worked, and they just couldn't make the decisions. They had to get out. New Jersey was chosen. I really don't know why, but it was near the financial markets, near our banks and so on, which were very important and one of the things we were doing. So that's probably why we went to New Jersey. But anyway, AK went their way, Armco went their way after AK was created. We still had Baltimore, Butler, and other facilities. So anyway.
Can I just ask you a question? Because
sure.
I'm new to this area. So there was the Armco Steel, the American Rolling Steel Company.
American Rolling Mill. That was what it was started out as.
And then in the 1980s, Kawasaki came in. And so there was a partnership between Armco and Kawasaki called AK Steel.
No, called a limited Armco's. Wasn't called AK Steel at that time. AK Steel didn't come into existence until the stock was sold. That company was created, and then stock sold in that company, so it was exchanged on the United Exchange. And Armco was still in existence at that time.
That's what I need to know.
Both steel companies were involved, were operating. But AK, like I said, went their way, Armco went their way. And then I knew some fellows that were involved in a due diligence that was going on. I wasn't part of that, but I knew about it. That on the AK side, that said, we do not want to merge with Armco because Armco had all this legacy cost, which happened to be the retiree benefits, because we had about 35,000, I think. That could be wrong, but it's pretty close to that. And retirees at that time, and we were paying the benefits out of our defined benefit plan. These were Middletown Works and National Works employees, but we kept all that along with all the rest of Armco employees. So we had that. So because they had this, Armco had this drag on them or responsibility on them, AK didn't. They were born without that because we took all that. And then they went on and invested $1 billion in a plant at Rockport, and that was their major plant then. But anyway, these fellows that I knew, they were doing the due diligence on the AK side, said, you don't want to merge with Armco because they had all this drag on them, you know. So, but anyway, it happened. And I don't know this for a fact, but because being the headquarters, I wasn't involved with any of that, but I'm not going to tell you the guy's name who was the mastermind of all this. But anyway, I knew him very well. And the merger happened. And they were all back together again. AK was probably a more viable of the two at the time because we did have all this drag. So they took the name of AK Steel instead of Armco Steel, but it was the same thing. It was all back together that was formerly Armco and created by Armco. So that's how AK became.
Thank you. That makes sense. What have you seen in Middletown that is a product of Miami University Middletown? How has this campus made an impact on the city?
Well, I think the fact, you know, that it was here, we talked about this a little while ago. I mean, you know, it was here for the kids, the parents of the students here that were local, you know, didn't really, it had to be less expensive, you know, for them. Great liberal arts school, and then, but yet you could get the technical side of it at Oxford, and we knew, like I said before, we had experience of the kind of graduates that Miami provided, and we did hire some of those.
So, is there anything else you want to add to this interview about the Middletown campus?
Well, I think it's one, if not the best, or one of the best assets in the city of Middletown as far as to put the city on the map. You know, there are a lot of negatives now. Middletown's not the all-American city according to what people look at that was way back, but I think it probably would have gone downhill a little farther if it wasn't for the campus. The campus is a very, very good asset for the, you know, for the city, and well, that's just my, you know, my opinion.